So, so there I am in 1989, coming to Penn to start my PhD. Originally from Ohio, by way of UC Santa Cruz and the Banana Slugs, and I'd had a little bit of linguistic training while I was working on the HPSG project at HP Labs, which mostly consisted of people like Tom Wasso and Ivan Sog and Dan Flickinger saying things like, "You can say that." So I had figured out by the time I got here, even before I met Bill above, that I had grown up on a dialect isogloss. And it's that yellow and pink line there. You see Fairfield County is just kind of coming down in between the yellow and blue part. That's where I grew up. It's the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. And so if you want to know you want to hear somebody that can understand, cross dependencies and things like that, I'm your man, right? I'm your informant, okay? So just you can keep that in mind. Anyway, I came here. I got interested in discourse and dialogue and pragmatics, partly through the work that I did at Hewlett-Packard, but also in big part through the 1987 Linguistics Institute, which was at Stanford, where I met a lot of you for the first time, or looked at you from afar with awe in my eyes, perhaps, maybe. And in particular, Ellen. I met Ellen and Arvin that summer. I took Ellen's pragmatics class, and I gave my first presentation at ACL, where I had Arvin and Barbara in the audience. My first presentation, I can remember being so nervous that I went and changed my clothes 15 minutes before my talk. To wear a dress. I don't know why. But I did, and I remember one of the questions that I got was from Barbara, something about the terminology of centering. And I think I was so flustered. I said, she asked me about the relationship to Joshi and Weinstein's work, and I said, well, I guess they get credit for the term. I think that. So anyway, I came, and it was such an exciting time to be at Penn. I was in the first cohort of students to come here for IRCS. And when I think of Penn, what I always think about is the fantastic community. And anytime I go anywhere, I see people that I got to know at Penn in the environment here. And I'm getting all choked up. And it was a really exciting time. I think my incoming class had 60 people in it. I think it was the first flush of the IRCS money, and we had this huge cohort of PhD students who all came in at the first year. The first year we had our offices in Moore, but then we got to actually have our offices over in the IRCS building. And I've heard of Sloan, Cognitive Science Colloquium, but we had the IRCS Colloquium. We had lots of visitors. Some weeks there were so many talks, there's no way you could keep up with it. And it was always really amazing to me now in retrospect to think about how we had people from psychology and linguistics and philosophy and history and everybody coming to those meetings every week on Friday and participating in the discussions. It was such an exciting intellectual environment, and I feel really, really fortunate to have been part of that. And some of the people who couldn't be here told me to say hi. So Carolyn Haycock says, say hi to everybody, Phil Resnick and Barbara. And of course, there's some people who might be saying hi from the great beyond. So when I got here, I kind of knew that Arvin wanted me to work on centering, right? This thing called centering theory. I knew that there was something called centering, but like what Kathy said, I was very stubborn. And also, he was very non-directive, right? So it took me a while I was trying to figure out, well, what is it that he wanted me to do? Because there is this stuff about centering prayer and systems theory. There's this stuff about these centering theories, like for your balance. I wasn't sure, if that's what we're talking. There's this centering prayer and centering practice. I kept looking stuff up. I kept thinking, what is it that he wants me to work on? There's this foot centering theory in biomechanics. How you can balance. I kept thinking, no, I don't think this is what he means, but I wasn't really getting any direction. And if you kind of looked, at the papers, it seemed to be about something about logic and inference, but then it seemed to be about referring expressions, and there were these shift things. I didn't know what those, these rough shifts and these smooth shifts and different kinds of things, and I really couldn't figure out exactly what it was that I was supposed to be doing at first. The only thing that Arvin consistently told me was I should work on data. So all the time he was telling me, you need to get some data, Lynn. You need to get some data. You should have some data. And so, eventually I started figuring it out, that there had been this Joshi Weinstein paper. They got the credit for the centering term. And then there was the work that they did with Barbara when Barbara was visiting here. And I remembered, my first ACL presentation we had built on Barbara's class. So I had Barbara as a professor at Stanford in 1986, and that was the renegade manuscript that would never die. The Gross Joshi and Weinstein manuscript that eventually came out as Gross Joshi and Weinstein 95. And one of the things I did figure out in that first year when I got here was that Arvin definitely wanted me to do is he wanted me to change it from whatever tech formatting system that thing was into LaTeX, update the BibTeX file, and see if I could get all this stuff to format properly in I don't even remember what it was in. It was in something called something else. And so this was fun. I got to go to Boston twice and talk to Barbara. Barbara said, what are you doing this for, Lynn? I said, I don't know, this is interesting. I'm trying to, I'm interested in this theory. I'd like to see this paper come out. Let's do it. And so eventually it did come out. But I was really always interested in dialogue, and there were very little in the way of resources for dialogue at that time. And this is only really begun to change, at a big scale. And we had these great examples, for centering. We had stuff like, I haven't seen Jeff for several days. Carl thinks he's studying for his exams, but I think he went to the Cape with Linda. And that's Candy's. And this was me and Susan's. It was supposed to be a donkey sentence, right? Brennan drives an Alfa Romeo. She drives too fast. Friedman races her on weekends. She often beats her. So, we were at Stanford. We were going to CSLI. It was donkey sentences all the way, so we thought we'd have to have one with the beat sentence in it. So these are the kind of examples we were working with. This is like just on the cusp of people starting to really do a lot of corpus-based work. And Arvin kept telling me, you really have to get, you have to get some data in. And Ellen Prince focused her pragmatics seminar on centering. She started doing that like the first year I was here, and every semester she had pragmatic seminar, and we were all encouraged at being part of IRCS to do a master's in linguistics at the same time while we were doing our PhD in computer science. And I did my master's on centering in Japanese. So every evening, not every evening, we had Ellen's seminar every term, once a week. We go over, and we have this meeting in Logan Hall. Ellen liked to teach at night. She used to like to work at home during the day, and she would teach at night. And that's the bologna sandwich that she and Jerry used to get together and have their bologna sandwiches just before our seminar with me. That was one of her favorite things to eat. And sometimes we had wine in the evening in the seminar. And that was another big way in which community was built up, and in which we had this cross-fertilization across linguistics and computer science, and we got to know all the people in linguistics who were interested in discourse, dialogue, and pragmatics, and that's how I got interested in really kind of deep pragmatics and syntactic structure. This led to Arvin gave me this great opportunity, together with Ellen, to write a proposal and get funding from National Science Foundation for a workshop on centering theory, which we held at Penn. And again, this was like get data. So we were all, at this point, lots and lots of us were working on naturally occurring data of different kinds in lots of different languages. And I couldn't find pictures of everybody. In fact, I don't have a single picture of Ellen. Does anybody have any pictures of Ellen? I would like some. Anyway, these are all people that came to the centering workshop, and as you can see, Arvin, once Dennis surrounded by his girls, all his all these different people, and it was really a great workshop, and it led to this book. And if you look at some of the, this book came out in '98, finally, Oxford University Press. We had better examples then. We had all these examples. We had Hindi. We had examples from the Harry Gross corpus. Julia, that should look familiar to you there. Harry, I have a problem. My daughter is working. Does that one look familiar to you? And then, there's the centering in Japanese. I think that might be, I don't know, what is that? Hindi, Turkish, Italian? Anyway, we did have better examples, and the field was moving more and more to to working on more naturally occurring data. And that was something that Arvin always pushed. This work, I was talking to Barbara Gross about it. It had a big legacy, from when I started working on Barbara's course on this stuff when I took Barbara's course at Stanford in 1986. The book was published in '98. I haven't done anything on censoring since that book came out. And Barbara said she hadn't done anything on censoring for a long, long time. But every time I check how many citations that paper has, it's like doubled. So now it has 1,537. I think the last time I checked last year, that paper had 800 citations. So, and my stuff on centering too, it still is having impact. And if you go and you look at who cites this line of work on censoring, it's people from all different disciplines. You get linguistics and philosophy, and it really does kind of reflect the cognitive science community that was created here at Penn. Now, though, we have a lot more data. I finally, after all this time, I've got interested in coreference again. I can hardly believe it. But I haven't done anything. But now that there's these online forums data, which are very, very dialogic, there's tons and tons of data. And I've got really interested in this forums data. I've been working on this for 2 years. And what I'm interested in is not the kind of anaphora that I worked on before, but I'm interested in these propositional anaphora, event reference, or what Bonnie would have called discourse deixis in her '88 paper. And if anybody is still interested in that problem, there's tons of it in this data. And I've got some tools for pulling out propositional event reference chains and stuff like that. It's really, really, really interesting data because the reference are the facts, the propositions, the beliefs that are under discussion in the discourse. And it's very, very natural data. And the last thing that I want to say is that Julia says she's got gender balance in her group. I swear that I tried just as hard to recruit men. But you can see those are my students who were volunteering when I ran the Intelligent Virtual Agents Conference in Santa Cruz this summer. And you can see that there's one guy there, and and all the rest of them are female. But I swear I'm not doing anything, but maybe single-handedly or a few of us all together, we could change the gender balance in computer science, which is now much worse than it was when I graduated from Penn. So that's all I have to say. And thanks to everybody for making such a fantastic community. No? Barbara, you ready?
Scott is.
Oh, Scott. All right.
You said almost everything I'm going to say.
I could say one thing that Scott told me that I always think of and I always tell my students. He said, don't read anything. It'll just ruin your good idea. I don't know if he's still giving that advice to. Does anybody want to ask me anything? Stuart? Yeah?
Based on the experience you talked about, give us some advice on what kind of red wine goes with bologna.
I recommend Stores Central Coast Infidel. It's very good value for money. $17 a bottle, Santa Cruz Mountains. And in fact, I know somebody who's who's betting their fortune that Santa Cruz Mountains wines are severely undervalued. So I would recommend drink as much of it as you can.